Just going to give it another minute here. I see folks are logging in. All right, let's get started. Good morning, presenters, our district board members and attendees. Welcome to the COGS Economic Development District's webinar on broadband. My name is Prit Patel, and Lucille Johnson and myself are the COGS staff that manage the Economic Development District for our region. We are, just so pleased to host the Texas Broadband Development Office this morning. As we all know, broadband has become an essential need, especially over the last few years, from the impacts to how we learn, how we work, how we conduct business, communicate, and so much more, all the impacts from the pandemic. So we're grateful for this opportunity to have the Texas Broadband Office present this morning. Before I introduce our presenter, I do want to let everyone know that the Economic Development District does have 2 web pages on the COG website with information on broadband, and we have dedicated one of those pages to anything we know about broadband, meaning funding opportunities, resources that we try to keep updated. And then the second web page is our economic development resource web page, which includes a section on broadband. And so those are links to just a list of broadband resources. The other piece on that website that I think is important to note is we have a section called data. And under that data section, we have links to different resources such as the Census Bureau, Stats America, places where you can find data when you're applying for different grants, be it broadband or anything else. So that's a great resource tool that we hope is helpful to you. And I'll post those in the chat here in a moment. And I would like to introduce to you this morning Megan Froh with the Texas Broadband Development Office. Megan is the outreach coordinator for the Broadband Development Office, and we're so grateful to have her here this morning. The presentation will be shared out to everyone after the webinar this morning, and so I want to remind everyone, please feel free to use the chat if you have any questions that you might have, and COG staff will monitor that chat. So, and with that, Megan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Britt. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go through just a high-level overview of what the BDO is, what we're working on, what's coming next for our office, and then I will make sure and leave enough time at the end to answer questions. That's most important to me, that I can hear from you guys and what questions you have and what things are affecting you in your community that maybe we can assist with. So I'm just going to start high level, and then we'll get a little more granular, and then leave time for questions. So can everyone see my screen? I want to make sure. Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to start with really what is broadband? A lot of people have questions about that. Is it internet? Is it something else? And essentially broadband is high-speed internet. So the minimum definition right now, this is FCC, so the Federal Communications Commission, they define broadband as 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. You can see I have 2015 there. That's a very outdated definition. The minimum is soon to be updated. New federal funding is targeting speeds of 100 over 20 or 100 over 100. And you're going to hear that oftentimes referred to as symmetrical speeds. If you hear someone say, oh, we're looking for symmetrical speed, they're talking about 100 download, 100 upload. So we know that we have a huge digital divide here in Texas. We have discovered that nearly 8 million Texans in about 3 million households do not have broadband. And when I say that, I want you to look at that definition there. That means they do not even have the minimum 25/3, which most of us today on this call, being able to stream a Zoom call, would find that that is not even adequate for what we need to do. So we're talking about 8 million people in Texas do not even have that. It's due to a lot of reasons. One being infrastructure. Obviously, we have some areas in Texas that we need to get infrastructure to, but also affordability. We have some folks that have we've got fiber to the home, but they can't afford to access it. And then also access to devices, as well as digital literacy. So there's a lot of moving parts when we talk about the digital divide in Texas. It's not just infrastructure. And a lot of us also don't really think about the impacts of broadband, but it's very far reaching, from economic development to disaster resilience, obviously education. I think most of us experienced during the pandemic the need for children to learn from home and be able to connect to the classroom. That was really difficult for a lot of communities to even put that in place. Buses with Wi-Fi hotspots. And our director, Greg Conti, often refers to hotspots as paperweights. If they can't connect to broadband, what good is a hotspot? And so education is something that's very important and something that really brought all of this to light. But healthcare as well. A lot of us are looking at telehealth these days. People can't reach their provider, and so if they can log in the comfort of their own home and talk to their doctor or a specialist perhaps that would be not accessible to drive to, now they have access to advanced healthcare if they have broadband. But if we talk about a community that doesn't, that's something that those citizens don't have access to. Also, disaster resilience. We heard from a lot of people on our listening tour on the coast whose infrastructure was completely knocked out by hurricanes. There's been a lot of other situations where infrastructure was wiped out. They had to wait for the storm to pass, go to the tallest building in town to be able to call out for help. And when you think about that, an emergency response and our first responders being able to communicate with one another in an emergency, not having broadband can be a really scary thing in those situations. So it is very far reaching. So as far as our office, the Broadband Development Office was established by House Bill 5, and we are housed within the Texas Comptroller's Office. It is very important to Comptroller Hager that we close this digital divide. He is a huge advocate for putting this funding in efficient ways across the state to make sure that we can ensure that we reach all Texans who do not have broadband right now and get them connected. So we're very grateful to be housed within his office and lean on the resources that he has. We have a lot of milestones legislatively that we need to meet. First and foremost was to create a broadband plan. I am happy to announce that we did meet that milestone. It was completed in June of this year, so just a few months ago. And I will make sure at the end of this presentation for it to provide you with a PDF of that plan that you can send out. This plan is a culmination of all the things that we heard on our 12-stop listening tour that Comptroller Hager spearheaded from all different regions of the state. Now, this is going to be an ever-evolving document. This is a living document. As we learn more, that plan will be updated. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware this is just an initial plan. So we're also working to secure federal and state funding. We're developing a competitive financial incentive program, and we are working to establish a statewide availability map. Now that map is due legislatively in January of 2023. We have we've connected with a vendor called Lightbox, and they are going to help us put together that address level availability map. So you will be able to look at this map, go to any address in Texas and find out if they are eligible or ineligible for funding, what kind of speeds that area is actually seeing. So we're hoping that this is going to be a really great resource for everyone in Texas, not only just our office when it comes to funding. And we're conducting outreach and digital literacy programs. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to closing the digital divide. And we're aware that we need to be mindful of those who do not have devices, who maybe do not have the digital skills to access the internet, even if they were to have infrastructure today at hand. So we're working to make those programs help Texans as well. And we're also making recommendations to state legislatures. So they are looking to us to see what we're learning as we talk to the citizens of Texas. So when it comes to the state broadband plan, and like I said, I'll make sure that everybody has a copy of this. You're going to see as you go through this, the different regions of Texas, the 12 economic regions of Texas, and what we discovered to be true in those regions as of today. What are the challenges and the barriers that these communities are facing? And what are some of the opportunities that we found that we could leverage the resources at hand in these regions to help close that digital divide? So I'll make sure everybody has a copy of that after the presentation. And I know what's most important to almost everybody is the funding. So how are we going to make this happen? How are we going to close the digital divide? When it comes to funding, there's two primary buckets of funding that are coming to our office, and our office will be the clearinghouse for these funds. One being the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. You're going to hear that a lot. That's coming from the U.S. Treasury. And the other is the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, or IJA. That's coming from the NTIA. There's a few pieces to that funding, one being broadband equity access and deployment, or you may have heard that referred to as BEAD, the BEAD program, as well as the Digital Equity Act, DEA. So there's a lot of moving parts within the IJA program. First and foremost, though, the American Rescue Plan Act, the CPF Coronavirus Capital Project Funds, that's $500.5 million that was allocated to Texas. And that is going to be the first funding opportunity that we are going to administer out through our office. We're looking to stand up that grant program next month, the end of October. So we are into September, believe it or not, and we have to get rules posted, guidelines posted, and a notice of funding availability posted before the end of October when the grant program is open. So I want you all to be, stay tuned to our website. Everything that is going to happen in the next 6 weeks or so is going to be very publicly available on our website. And when it comes to the rules and the guidelines, I think it's really important for communities to really dig into those. That's going to be important to know who's eligible, who's ineligible, what is the application process going to be like, what do I need to have on hand before I think about applying for this funding. So I want you to all stay tuned, and that's broadbandfortexas.com. It's there at the bottom of my slide as well. So everything that's important that's going to be happening in just the next couple of months is going to be on our website. So when it comes to this funding, the $500.5 million, we're looking at projects that are going to be able to provide 100 megabits per second symmetrical. So that 100 upload, 100 download. They must include a universally available low-cost option, and any provider that is participating in this program and applying for this funding has also got to subscribe to the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. All of these funds must be expended by 2026. So the time clock on this has already started ticking. Now that does not mean that a project that starts in the spring has to be complete by 2026. It just means that the funding has to be expended out by 2026. So that's why it's very important to our office to get this grant program up and running quickly next month, like I said, because we know that time clock has already started ticking, and time is of the essence to get these projects funded. So that second bucket of funding, the IIJA funding, this is going to be the largest bucket of funding. Now, NTIA has not yet released how much each state will receive, but we do know that each state will receive at minimum $100 million. By our estimates, we're looking at 1 to 4 billion from this bucket of funding, specifically for broadband. Now, we know that these funds are not going to be accessible until 2024 to administer out. So that's a little bit, far out, but the time will pass so quickly. Communities need to get ready. They need to get shovel ready, as I'm sure you've heard us say a lot. You need to figure out what's going on in your community. What are the needs in the community? Where are areas that are not receiving broadband today? And what vendor will you be working with? How much will your project cost? All of these things need to be known before that grant portal opens for applications. With this particular bucket of funding, there is a cascading requirement. So we've got to fund projects for unserved areas, and that's anyone that falls below that minimum definition of 25/3. Once we have done that, then and only then can we move on to underserved areas. And that's going to be anyone that falls below 100/20. If there is funding left over at that point, we can then look at projects that target community anchor institutions that are not receiving 1 gig at the time of the project. So that's going to be your schools, your libraries, your hospitals. Now, within the IIJA funding, there's also a smaller piece specifically for digital equity. So that's going to be 2.75 billion nationwide. Again, we don't know how much Texas is going to receive yet, but the purpose of that is specifically for digital equity, the affordability, the access to devices, and the digital literacy component. So when we look at the criteria, and these are the federal guidelines, our office is technology agnostic. So however we can get broadband to these areas, we feel that's what we should do. Now, when it comes to the federal funding, they are prioritizing fiber. So we do need to keep that in mind, that the reliable broadband service they see is fiber optic. But we also have cable modem, the DSL, and fixed wireless. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if an area is served primarily by satellite service, even if they're receiving 100/100, which is the speed that everybody's wishing for. But if they are served entirely by satellite, they will be considered under this federal funding to be unserved. So they're going to fall in that first bucket when we talk about the cascading effect, the unserved first. And so if your area or an area in your community to be served only by satellite, then go ahead and count them as unserved when you're polling your community to figure out what areas are getting what speeds. Now, our office is small. We have a director, and we were allocated 4 FTEs. So we are a small team, but like I said, we are housed within the comptroller's office. And thankfully, we can leverage and lean on the resources of the office. We're in a really good situation to be within the comptroller's office. We also have a board of advisors, and Comptroller Glenn Hager is the chairman of that board. There's 8 board members. And there's also the Governor's Broadband Development Council. Now, this was formed in 2019. This was formed prior to the pandemic and prior to our office being established. There's 21 board members, and they develop an annual report that we use as a resource for gathering information and making decisions. So when it comes to community readiness and being shovel ready, something that I always want to make sure and communicate is that you need to assemble a team. Oftentimes, you need to find a broadband champion in your community. And if you don't know who that is and you're on this call today, it might be you. You may not want to hear that, but it might be you. You might be the broadband champion for your area, to bring awareness about what your community needs and to also bring awareness of this funding back to your community. We've talked to a lot of communities that are very ready, they're very prepared for the funding, and yet I've talked to others that they're really not sure where to begin. So our office on our website at broadbandfortexas.com, we've created a community toolkit that I'd encourage all of you to check out. It's sort of a how-to step for step on how to get ready, how to get started. What do I need to be thinking about? But assembling a team is very important, and identifying the priorities. Who's going to be served with these funds? What's going to happen in the community? And harness that data. Figure out what the assets are. What's the tallest tower in town? Do you have a water tower? Could we put a fixed wireless antenna there? You need to be thinking about the assets that you have in your community that we could leverage, and therefore bring the dollar amount of that project down, to be efficient with the funding. And also engage providers. You need to know in your area, who are the internet service providers? Is there just one? Are there multiple? You need to know that, because those are the folks that you're going to need to work with to get these projects done. And engage those providers. Talk to them about the needs in your community. When it comes to this funding, public-private partnerships are going to receive preference. The fact that a community and a service provider would be working together, we know that that's going to be the most efficient use of the funds, that teamwork, and it's going to take a lot of teamwork. But evaluating those solutions before you apply for funding, I think it's really important to know what the needs in the community are, who's going to be served, how many households will be served that are currently unserved, what provider will be doing this work, and how much is the project going to cost. You're going to need to know that before our application portal opens and before you apply for funding. And it will be a competitive grant program. So I think it's really important to come in prepared, to ask questions. Please contact our office. Let us know if we can be helpful to you. We want successful applications, because successful applications mean projects being completed and therefore closing the digital divide in Texas. So we want to be a resource. We want to be helpful, and we want to answer as many questions as we can in advance of that funding. So here's my information. broadband@cpa.texas.gov is our group email. So all of our team members will see an email come to that address. If you've got a specific question about grants, if you have a specific question about how to get started, infrastructure, whatever it may be, send us an email. Someone will answer that email, and we're going to connect you with the resources that you need. So please feel free to ask questions. I am here to answer questions today.
If you don't feel like unmuting and speaking, you can use the chat feature also to ask questions. Megan, I know that the Middle Mile program is not coming through the state broadband development office, but could you, since that is an active program, could you share what you know about that specific program?
Sure, yes, absolutely. So Middle Mile is coming through NTIA, and communities and providers can apply directly through NTIA for that Middle Mile funding. Our office is not going to be a clearinghouse for the Middle Mile program. Now, NTIA does ask that a provider or a community applying for that funding communicate with your local broadband office, keep us informed. A lot of people are thinking they need some sort of formal letter from us, with their application. You do not. If you'll email us at broadband@cpa.texas.gov, let us know where the project is, who's applying for it, if you know the dollar amount. We're keeping a log of those things so that we can keep track of where Middle Mile is going to go. That's obviously going to help when it comes to last mile connectivity. And then we will send you an email saying, thank you for keeping us in the loop, and you can use that email with your application to show that you have communicated with our broadband office. Now, Middle Mile, and some people may be confused, and I'm sorry, I should have gone over this. When it comes to fiber and Middle Mile versus last mile, a good way to think of this, if you're not aware of how this fiber tree works, is it's very much like a tree. So Middle Mile is like the trunk of the tree. Last mile is going to be the branch that gets it from the trunk out to the leaf. Think of the leaf as a residence or a business that is actually getting connectivity. You've got to have that primary Middle Mile, that trunk, before you can have the last mile branch that actually ultimately turns on broadband connectivity for a resident or a business.
Megan, we've got a couple of questions. One question is, just to be clear, the IGIF funds will not be available until 2024. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. And I know that nobody wants to hear that. We need funding yesterday, not in a few years. The way that NTIA has set up the milestones for states to accomplish what they need to even draw down the funds is going to take a few years. And like I said, they have not even released to each state how much funding is going to come. So we're still all just in a holding pattern waiting, but we do know that we need to get ready and that those 2 years are going to fly by. But that is correct. NTIA has put out a timeline, and 2024 is the earliest that the states will be able to draw down the funds and therefore be able to administer them out to applicants.
Okay, and just following up on that, we also have a question requesting to repeat the steps for preparing for the grant. So I think that cycle you have.
Oh, yes, let me go back. And another thing, like I said, the community toolkit on our website at broadbandfortexas.com. You can go down to the bottom, find it's community toolkit. You click that, it'll take you directly to it. We've really gone into much more detail than this slide shows about what to do to get ready and things to think about, who to talk to. So that's an excellent resource. Check out the community toolkit.
Yeah, so if you could just kind of go back over this, we would really appreciate that.
Okay, so essentially what you want to start doing in your community is engage your stakeholders. And really in this case, stakeholders, anybody that's going to have, be affected by this project. Talk to your schools, talk to your hospitals, talk to your leaders in your community about what the needs are. It's a great idea to do a community survey. Have people do a speed test, not just put on, my bill, my internet bill says, that I'm paying for this amount of, okay, what are you really getting? Are you really getting what you pay for? Find that out. Assemble a team. And that can be, we have some small communities. I am from a rural area in West Texas, and I am aware that we have some communities where, the mayor, maybe the school bus driver, maybe the volunteer fire department chief and the dog catcher, and they're wearing so many hats. And so when I say assemble a team, that doesn't need to be necessarily a formal board or a large team. It just needs to be somebody or a couple of people who understand the needs of the community when it comes to broadband, can connect to our office and disseminate the information and throw the community in the application portal. They need to apply for the funding. They need to know that everyone in Texas needs to be connected. This is not just going to go to large communities. A lot of people are concerned, will rural be left out? No, rural is very important. And in fact, that's where the infrastructures, are lacking. And so when it comes to specifically the IIJA funding and that cascading effect of unserved, underserved, they are really targeting those areas, and most will be rural, that are completely unserved. But just having someone in the community know that information, know what funding is coming, that's what's important about assembling a team, just so that someone is advocating for the community. And then identify the priorities. So let's say, let me just give you an example. Maybe everybody on Main Street's connected. Maybe all the businesses in town have no problem connecting and they can run their credit card machines, no problem. But maybe we have a school that's off the beaten path and they have a hard time connecting. And we all know now the new Texas education exams are going to be online only. So are they concerned about that? Are they concerned about being able to get those students connected for that test? So identify the priority. In this case, I would say that school is a priority. And if you know that about your community, this area of town is completely unserved and this school district is having a hard time with connectivity, those are things that you need to be able to identify when it comes to that application. it also needs to be something that you can talk to a provider about and go, hey, we don't need you to spend money over here. We need you to put your efforts and your funding over here in this part of town, because this is where the needs really are. But we don't know that. You know that in your communities, and we want to hear from you and know what your priorities are, what your needs in your own community are. So if you don't know that, we won't know that. So I think it's really important to identify those priorities. And then harnessing the data. And I put that just so that you can you would be able to describe what's going on in your community and what assets you have, what you think would work in your community. Maybe you don't need fiber directly. Maybe you know, hey, I've got a water tower sitting right here that could broadcast 25 miles in every direction. And maybe fixed wireless is the way to go for your community because you have that asset. So let us know that. And that's something that I think is important to include in your application.
Megan,
and then, you know, just through the rest of the circle, the consider digital inclusion. Are there areas of your community where maybe you already have the infrastructure, but you have some folks that are struggling with digital literacy? If you know that, then we can plug you in with resources to help with that specific need and the resources. And like I said, engage those providers. You know, I've talked to several communities. They don't know. They know of like maybe one in their area, but they don't know if there are other providers. You need to find that out. Who's willing to come in? Maybe who already has middle mile fiber in your area that you could harness for the last mile funding. And when we talk about evaluating solutions, it's just that, it's brainstorming, kind of like, okay, do we have a water tower? Would fixed wireless work? We already have dark fiber, a middle mile running down, you know, the middle of town. So now we know what we need is last mile connectivity. So you just need to evaluate the different types of solutions that you think would work best for your community, to bring that community into the served category. And just knowing that. What we're asking basically is for communities to tell us what you need and what you're lacking. We are trusting that the communities will let us know that, because we otherwise will not know.
Megan, harnessing the data, so if a local community is gathering data on where they're unserved, underserved, or you know where their challenges are, where they don't have access to broadband, how will that work in conjunction with the FCC maps? I mean, if there's different, you know,
that's a great question. Yeah, great question. So the FCC maps, which we all know right now are completely outdated, many are inaccurate. The FCC knows that as well. They are supposedly updating their maps. Now that was supposed to be this summer. It's been delayed. We're still waiting to see those updated maps. When it comes to the federal funding, yes, they are going to be relying and looking at their maps to determine that. Now, in the meantime, we are creating a Texas statewide broadband availability map. We will be able to challenge the FCC map with our map. And a lot of communities will ask, well, we've done mapping, or should we do mapping? And if the state is going to do mapping, why would we spend money to do mapping? Now, I think it's really very important for a community to know about itself. So if you have already mapped your area, send us that information so that, or challenge our map so that we know we have an accurate map to then challenge the FCC map. So what we want to do is really ensure accuracy. And we are going to make a map that's very granular, address level. And everyone's right, the funding will lean back to the FCC map. But if we have better, more accurate information, then we can challenge that map and say, no, that's not right. This area is eligible for funding. You have them marked as ineligible. And so we will be able to override some of the inaccuracies if we have the most accurate information, and some of that will definitely come from communities. We did just begin our data collection from Texas internet service providers. We sent that email out yesterday, actually. They are all very well aware that they need to provide this data, and they need to supply us with accurate data, or they will be ineligible from this funding. So we do have that ability to say, hey, if you're not going to work with us on this availability map, you're not going to be eligible for funding. And so the hope there is that we are going to get accurate information from all of our service providers, and therefore be able to better represent areas of eligibility for our communities in Texas.
Thank you. And we've got a few questions that have popped up. One is on the private-public partnerships, could that be with existing relationships with carriers, or does that mean that partnerships need to go through a bid process?
That's up to the community. That's not something that we have oversight on. When it comes to applying for the funding, the public-private partnership, however you have worked that out, it is how you'll apply. So whether it's the community applying and saying we've partnered with XYZ internet service provider, or it's the internet service provider applying and they say, hey, we've partnered with this community, you'll need to list all of that on the application. There will be prompts, for public-private partnerships, what to complete on the application. And we are working on a guidance document that's going to help much better explain an instructional manual, basically, for how to complete these applications. But if you're already in a partnership with an internet service provider in your area, and you discuss, hey, yes, we want to go up for this funding, we want to apply together, that's fine. You may be in a situation where you don't have an established partnership, and you need to put out an RFP and see which internet service provider would work best for you. And if you're doing that, my advice is do your due diligence, just as you would if you were contracting someone to do work on your home. It's important that you vet whatever service provider that you decide to work with. Talk to other communities that have worked with them. Did they complete those projects? Have what successful grants have they applied for? Things like that. I think it's really important. Talk to a lot of people, not just one. Unfortunately, with any kind of large funding, I always say, just like when a hailstorm comes to town, everybody's a roofer, and everybody with pickup truck is now, running a roofing company. And it's important that you understand what company you're working. I think that there will be situations where we have providers or grant writers that contact communities and say, hey, I can help you, I can do this. And I don't want you to just take their word for it. I want you to do your due diligence when you check them out.
Thanks, Megan. And there's been a couple of questions about when maps will be released. And
Okay.
as Margot had posted that the Texas map will be released in January 2023. And I believe
That's
that's
correct.
the same time as the FCC maps, correct?
The FCC maps are supposed to come out sooner than that.
Okay.
That's the hope. So they were actually supposed to release updated maps this summer. Obviously, that has not happened. But we're hoping in the next couple of months that the new FCC maps will be released. Now, legislatively, our map is mandated to be published by January of 2023. It may come out a little sooner, but that's what we're shooting for. And then we will be able to target the FCC map in that challenge process if we need to. Fingers crossed they have an accurate map.
Thanks, Megan. Another question we have is, will the state's NTI funds lose federal identities so they can become a state match for federal grants, for other federal grants?
Say that one more time.
So once the state's NTI funds, will they lose, when they come to the state, will they lose their federal identity so that if people are applying for federal grants, there's not a conflict in that match that might be required?
Oh, I see. So IIJA is the only bucket of funding that's administered through our office that requires the 25% match. So CPF funds don't require a match. There have been talks with communities that they may want to use their CPF funds, part of that as a match to IIJA. The problem is that the CPF funds need to be expended by 2026. And the IIJA application window may not even open for another 2 years. And so there's going to be a really fine line there of opportunities that where the overlap is going to run out of time. Now,
Megan? Megan? I think we may have lost her there. Margot, are you still online?
Hi, yes, I think we're having some VPN issues on
Okay.
our end, which is ironic given the situation. Megan is hopping right back on. Let me,
In the meantime, well, I know she's sharing her screen. I was going to say, I have a slide on that middle mile program that I'm happy to also share with everyone.
oh, that'd be great.
Let me see if I can do stop sharing, and there we go. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sit here. Just really quick, because that middle mile program is currently active and accepting applications, I'm just gonna add a little bit more additional information to what Megan's presented, but this is one of the few programs coming down from NTI, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, where cities, counties, you'll see the list of eligible organizations here, all different political divisions of the state, some of the electric companies, that you can all apply for this funding. And this is the funding that can be used towards construction, improvement, and acquisition of middle mile infrastructure. And I know that's very important to local communities. So they are accepting applications through September 30th, 2022. And I'll share this slide in the email that we send out to you. But the grant awards are expected to be between $5 and $100 million for this middle mile program. In some of the webinars, NTA webinars that we have attended, one of the things that we've heard from them is they are encouraging partnerships. So, for example, if a city and a school district wanted to partner together in an application, or say maybe a rural county wants to partner with all the cities within their county to apply for that funding, those are areas that you might want to consider. But this is, as far as we're aware, this is the only program where eligible organizations can apply for funding directly to the NTIA. The rest of the funding is being funneled through the state, and this is actively an open program. And again, the applications will be received, can be submitted through September 30th, 11:59 Eastern time. And I'll share this slide and also the links to this program with everyone that's attending today. But this is, we really want to encourage folks that are needing support and needing funding to address, construction, improvement, and acquisition of that middle mile infrastructure that Megan spoke about, that this is a great opportunity to apply for that funding. And just a reminder that because of the pandemic, we have this opportunity, or local organizations have an opportunity to apply for funding. We may not see these dollars or these opportunities be available, in 5 or 10 years. So taking advantage of the fact that you can apply for this funding right now is, we would definitely encourage it. So I just wanted to share this slide with everyone. I don't know if Megan was able to join us.
I am here. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes.
So sorry. Well, I always like to show the example of why broadband is so important, for meetings and such. But no, I'm back. I totally lost my connection. So were there any other questions? I think we left off. I don't know if you heard my response on the federal funding for eligible applicants that may have applied previously for other federal funding, and how that may keep them from being eligible for this funding. We're still waiting on guidance on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think we got cut off right somewhere in the middle of that. So thank you for that clarification.
That
Are any of our panelists or board members have any questions? And attendees, please feel free to use that chat if you have any additional questions for Megan and Margot.
And I will make sure here in just a minute, I will send out the slide deck with a copy of our plan. And I have a great funding infographic that really helps explain these different buckets of funding, what they can be used for, kind of the timeline there. I will send that out. Feel free to share that with the group.
We will. So, does anyone else have any questions for the Texas Broadband Development Office? as Megan said, so we'll be sharing the slide deck with you, and also a slide on that middle mile program, the contact information for the Texas Broadband Development Office, and then the links that were shared out in the chat today that we think will be helpful to all of you in learning more about what the programs are, and having some time to look through those programs. So Megan, anything else you'd like to share with us today?
Again, just please visit our website, broadbandfortexas.com. I can't say that enough. That is where all the information will be updated. Application portal will be there, the rules, the guidelines, guidance document, NOFA. All of that is going to be on the site. So if you will stay tuned there, you're going to have the latest and greatest information, as well as our community toolkit. I think it's a really valuable resource.
Is there an opportunity for folks to sign up for a newsletter so that that information can be pushed out to their email address?
Yes. In fact, I will send that out to you as well. If you could send that out to the group, there's a link. You can just fill in your information. We do a monthly newsletter. And again, you'll get all of those updates. So we'll send that out as well.
Okay, wonderful. Lucille, do you have anything you'd like to share? Well, we just want to thank you so much, Megan, for this information and all of these resources. We know how essential, as I said on the front end, how essential broadband is to every aspect of life, and it's becoming an absolute necessity to be able to do so much.
It is.
So we're so grateful for. There's Lucille for the information you provided today, and we will certainly share that information out to our contacts here. We really appreciate your support to our region here at the district.
Thank you for having me. And again, please, anyone on this call, feel free to contact our office. Call me directly, send me an email. Margot's on the line. All of our staffing information is on our website. Again, broadbandfortexas.com. You can click our names, send us an email. We are happy to be helpful.
And Megan, I just want to chime in and second what Prit is saying. We certainly appreciate your visit with us today and all of the information that you shared and the time to take to answer the questions that folks had. And I'm sure there will be many, many more as we're trying to weed our way through, particularly when these funding notices hit next month.
Yes.
It will be, game on trying to get a lot of information. So thank you for taking time with us today and going over all of this, and so glad that Margot, so glad that you are on board too, and that we can call on you guys as we see that there is a need for us in this region.
Well, thank you all. Please feel free to reach out anytime.
All right.
And Prit, before everybody goes, I just want to thank Prit for setting this up, making these contacts, and making sure that this event was a successful one today. So thank you guys. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lucille. We wish everyone a good rest of the work week. And as we have mentioned several times, we will certainly share all these resources out with all of you. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. It's a great webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.